Some would foolishly call him old school, but his lessons have never been more relevant. Wayne Sutton grew up in the East Coast and spent 2 decades in the Royal New Zealand Navy, where precision, trust and grit weren't buzzwords, they were survival. When he swapped the sea for the auction floor, he brought the same discipline to real estate. For decades, he's been handing out golden nuggets. Simple truths that can help you stand firm when the market shifts and the noise gets loud. Wayne's here to show you how old school principles still build modern success and why good agents never really stop learning. So Wayne, tell me, from the days of quote it low, watch it grow, all those old scripts that come out of the 80s and 90s, out of auction, what's changed for you, Wayne?
Mate, everything's changed for me, right? When we first started doing real estate, while I was working in Gisborne, and we lost the freezing works. I started in Birkenhead in Auckland with Harcourts when I left after 20 years in the Navy, moved down to Gisborne, and where the family was, and like we do, and all of a sudden, after about 2 years in there, the freezing works collapsed, closed down. The abattoirs closed down, went to Wairoa. The Watties went to Hastings. The Best Friend Pet Foods dropped down. We went from an average sale price of about $130,000 a year down to 80. There was 62 agents and was 24 sales a month. And so I followed the auctions around the country, followed Ross Foreman around the country after I saw him at a conference, and followed the Aussies were over here training us in those early days on how to do auctions, and they had this, and that's exactly what they did, what you just said with regards to quoting it low. Ross Foreman used to teach us to breathe through our teeth and say if a house was worth 800,000, we'd breathe through our teeth. Someone says, what's the house worth? You go, that's what first thing you had to do is breathe through your teeth and just say, oh, I don't know, they've had interest around 720 and they're taking it seriously. Who knows? You know?
Yeah.
So that's the breathe through your teeth exercise. But I could understand where it's coming from with regards to getting a person in the right frame. And the vendor servicing was at another level. They were just hammering. And I couldn't understand it. So I ended up adjusting a few things myself. And I went to the Ross Foreman Auctioneers course in about 1997 and called my first auction at the end of that year. And I actually started to make money because I had 25 listings at the time, Aaron. 25 listings. Only been in real estate about 2.5 years. Thought, shit, I'm doing well, but it was so much work and I wasn't getting any sales and I was never home. It was 24/7. So I had to find out there must be another bloody way. And I started looking at appraising, and I was trying to appraise very, very accurately. I thought I was anyway. And I had pictures of everything to the vendors and got the price, what I thought was right. And then I discovered that market value is not my fault. Market value is no one's fault. In fact, I discovered that the market is bigger than any of us, and our job is to interpret it. We cannot set it. And once we understand that in our mind, then I started to look at process. And then I got a phone call from Elliot Falconer.
So let me just go back to that. Market value is not my fault, which is correct. And I picked up on we were taught to hammer vendors and hammer buyers, and then you made some adjustments. What are the adjustments you made to that sort of ethos around quoting it low or hammering vendors?
Well, buyers are always looking for a surety of purchase, Aaron.
Yeah.
You'll get them involved. So at the moment, for example, and it was worse than this in Gisborne, but like in Levin and that, it's about 42 days to sell. And that's only for the houses that sell. So if it's 42 days to sell, Aaron, it's 42 days to bloody well buy.
Yeah.
And so you've got people turning up to an auction program on a market that's really slow and dead and not making a commitment because they don't have to. The market behaviour is such a process or such a way that they don't have to. The house will be there next week.
Yes.
So they had to, first of all, in the old days, we started doing investment pricing, but it didn't sit well with me in the end because it just felt like it wasn't the truth.
So what we're saying, Wayne, just for our listeners, that was a number that you would quote. Oh, it's clearly worth more than X at a number that your vendor wouldn't sell at that number. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, well, they'd pick an educating guide. That was the process. They
Yeah.
have a vendor hope to get level. Then you have a market value. Then
Yeah.
you'd have an educating guide. Do you remember that? Yeah, so they have an educating guide. The rules are nothing back to the owner unless above the educating guide, unless it was cash and unconditional. All right.
Right.
And
So
so,
we were taught to quote low to the vendor.
yeah, we did quote really low to the vendor. And so I found that hard to get my head around. And, well, at the start, it was pretty easy to do, but it just didn't feel right to me because it wasn't the bloody truth. All right. And
So
so,
what do you do now, Wayne? If you're not quoting that, what do you tell the vendor now?
what do I tell the vendor or the buyer?
Well, both actually. So let's start with the vendor. What information are you communicating back to the vendor, the seller?
Well, for starters, the first week, before we get into that vendor, the first week is the most important part of any program that you do. The first week, how you set your vendor up in the first week is just as important as a reserve set and a meeting with your buyers. Those are three things. All right.
Yes.
So a reserve set, when you sit down, if you've got to know a few things about your vendor. Obviously, who's calling the shots.
Yep.
And
Who's
if
the
it is
decision
calling the shots,
maker?
never leave the wife out of it's the man.
Yep.
Two, what personality are they? Because I found when I adjusted my way of thinking after I understood about personalities, are they peaceful? Are they powerful? Are they precise accountants, for example? Or are they playful, a playful person?
Yes.
And there's mixtures of that. So understanding where you go with that. If it's a precise person, you really need to hit your goal. Never be late, always be sharp. They feel safe that way. All right. So there's
Okay.
certain ways in which you deal with people. So I wanted to understand where they were thinking on the market. Had they had any information that could help us? Because we've got 42 days to find out where it is. Because what I feel, there's two things with an auction program is you provide a real opportunity for a premium and get the vendor ready to appreciate it. So that's the two jobs that we have. To get the vendor ready to appreciate it, has to have an understanding about price. And so I really started to click into that when I went to Kapiti. When I moved from Harcourts in Gisborne, I started to learn when I went to Kapiti because I was in '99, I became the auction manager for Mana Kapiti Horror for Mick Robbers, if you remember Mick.
So just to be clear, yeah, you're going, who's calling the shots and what's
Yeah.
the personality type that I'm dealing with, right?
Oh, yeah, shit, yeah. And then
Yeah.
why are they selling? Because you've already got them listed for auction. And you can say we've got a week to find, we've got 4 weeks to find out where the market is. And then,
Okay.
and I'll show them through what an appraisal is. And appraisals can be kind of misleading, to tell you the truth. Jesus Christ, markets move quicker than people do. And
Yep.
so I think that understanding, you get the vendor to understand that what you're going to do is you're going to go through an interview process to find out where the market is. And once he's all set up for that and you've got it all right, there's a thing that changes, and that's your trust levels. But I'll go into that in a minute. With buyers, if you're bringing, and so, sorry, right, you get the vendor on song because all you want the vendor to do at the end is to have an appreciation on where the market is or isn't. And one of the things that a lot of people discover is where it's not priced, especially if they've been on
Yes.
the market for about 6 months and you're picking it up. So, well, all the hard work's been done. At least we know where it's not priced.
Yeah.
Let's actually find out why your house is selling. You just go back and say there's nothing wrong with the property. It's just a slight price problem. I can't believe the other agent didn't take you through that. And then suddenly you're just into your auction program. You cover that off. And I suggest that they do their feedback, their phone calls on a Sunday night. Sunday nights I'm finding a little bit more practical for people that have still got the property in their mind, and you're the only one who would be doing that. And that way you can clear yourself up for the rest of the week. So yeah, I'm finding that's the best day to actually do your price feedback. A lot of people don't believe me, but
Great. So I like those words, an appreciation of where the market is. So do you meet your sellers after 1 week as the auctioneer? Do you meet them or have a conversation, a Zoom or whatever, but you have a point
Yeah,
of
yeah, no,
contact
I get
one
hold of them
week?
straight away. But that second week, I'm interested.
Yeah,
The
second
second
week.
week,
Okay.
yeah,
And
yeah, because
when the
I want to be,
conversation when the conversation goes from, I want $1 million, I need to get $1 million more, and all creditable feedback from the market from sales is at 850. How do you deal with, as we know, there's usually a gap. Doesn't matter if the market's going up, if the market's going down, the vendors invariably, and we don't blame them, want more than what their home's worth because
yeah,
they're in their
yeah.
home, they're not looking at the entire market.
So that's just words, right? Okay,
Yep.
you're looking for scripts and dialogues. But what I'm taking back is that you get your trust right. You get your trust right. You got them trusting you from day one. They
Yep.
go, and then the next step up from trust levels is a thing called entering the danger. The danger zone will always be price, 90% of the time anyway. So you're going to enter that danger zone, right? If you've got your trust levels up to a very high level, right? Okay, you know that because they'll invite you into that danger zone. Normally, after about the second week, if you've been up against three other agents that are wanting to list it, but you haven't won it because you haven't been won it because you're a superstar, they still like the other buyers. They just like what you had to say better. So,
Yes.
and that's actually a trust level based on expectations and promise. And you've got
Okay.
different trust levels on the way through. The counter, Marty Ritchie can go in there and get a listing straight away because he's got a trust level of reputation. And then a manager or an auctioneer has one on authority, and they'll listen to us a little bit more than they would the underling. But if the agent starts to get their trust levels right, you get invited into that zone. And so they quite often you get invited to say, where would you like to set your number or where you're thinking on your reserve? You see that on reserve meetings, and the agent will say, well, I'm around about what do you call it? Say 1 million. But how do you feel about that? And they'll ask the agent or ask me. So they've invited us into that danger zone on price. But
What do
they're
you
in,
think?
well,
Am
you
I
just
being
dive into it.
realistic?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
dive in straight away and just say to them, I think you're well and truly highly optimistic at that level, but you knew that before you asked me.
I like that. Just from our listeners. So,
I just say to them that when they invite me in, if I get
yeah,
my trust right, if they say, oh, I think it should be 1 million and it should be 920, they say, no, I'm at 1 million, I'm not a cent under. Well, and how do you feel, Wayne? I think you're highly optimistic, but you knew that before you asked me.
I like that. You're
You
highly
know,
optimistic, but you knew that before you asked me.
and then you just follow it up. You don't want to sound to be flippant. Some of those, when you hear these one-liners, you think they're flippant. You don't. You say, "Hey, listen, but we've got five people showing interest. Three of them are possibly bidding. Let's get a plan to get the best we can out of this, shall we? You've got an opportunity to sell. Would you want to lose that?" And you can understand where they're going. So
Yes.
one of the things that I speak to them before we go into auction is the opportunity. The other option is obviously private treaty and setting a price, isn't it? But what I found in Gisborne was that everyone was setting prices, and then they'd go through this process of reduce your price to. And the reason why they do that, Aaron, is to try and find the marketplace so they can sell.
Yes.
And that process is so long. And I call that market discovery by price reduction. And it
Yeah.
is the most slowest, expensive way of an owner to establish where his money is. Because market value is not your fault. That's what I learned in Gisborne. That's big time. And they take it personally. If they think their house is priced here, someone's mentioned a figure. If you come back with a different figure, the owners are starting to think it's a personal thing. It's bigger than them.
Yes.
So yeah, and the other thing to when you're going through, I know you've done it on your listing form, and when you're listing with people, is the fact that you've gone through what do you call it? Well, I have seen so many auctions fall over when people start doing their due diligence. I
Yeah.
mean, long due diligence. It's normally a week before they're going to put pen to paper. Correct?
Yeah.
It's a week before they're going to put pen to paper, and they're really starting to do their due diligence. And then all of a sudden, we find out there's a compliance problem, a CCC problem. Maybe it was something that was done before them, or they did it and they didn't think anything by pulling that wall out, and suddenly it's getting in the way, and it's like pouring ice water over the buyers. You hardly ever get the buyers back at the same level that they were, and I
Yes.
call that disclosure by discovery. And they're big black dogs. And you need to make sure that the young people need to make sure that they do everything they can. So, oh, I see you've got an extension over there. When did that go up? This is everything they can to make sure that they're not going to get caught out on due diligence time and lose their keen buyer, because if you front-foot a buyer, a front-foot a disclosure, it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to back-foot it.
What did you say? Disclosed by mark? No, what was by market discovery?
Dis-
What was?
Disclosure by buyer discovery.
Yeah. And
Agree
that's
with
never a good thing, right? Because it just eats into people's equity, right? And no one
yeah,
likes surprises. They're only for birthdays and Christmases. Yeah. I love
yeah.
that. Disclosure by market discovery. And yes, it always, yeah, it's one that a lot of people fall into, correct?
Oh shit! And we just think it. Get your disclosures right. No, get your disclosures right. Get them right. Don't let
Yeah.
them catch you. And I'll tell you what they do. It happens too often, and we get told about these things, and there's things that we never used to disclose, but some vendors don't want them disclosed. Bugger me. And the
Well,
other
we
thing
have
is,
we
make
have to,
sure
yeah.
that you get all your tools on the table before
Yeah.
you sell.
So
All
Wayne,
right.
there's some really good nuggets in there. So you run the process on auction day with the same bidder, and let's say the bidding invariably under competitive arousal, it stops at 950 and the vendor's still at $1 million. What are some of the words that you can help for your vendors to understand this is the market? This is a really good opportunity versus they're thinking, hey, I'm giving away 50 grand that, was never
Yeah,
there
yeah.
anyway. But share with us in your experience how you can help your vendors understand this is a really good result.
Well, you would have done that through the program.
Yeah.
You would have done that, got the information through the program. I think it's quite crucial to understand that side of things. Hold on, I had a bloody note down here. Because listening to what the buyers have to say, I think is pretty crucial
Yeah.
to interview them at length, to keep yourself aware of what's happening with recent sales. As I said, markets move quicker than people. So you could have in the last week or so something happened. Get that information back to the owner, because that's never hang your hat on it. Because valuers can't be right on the button at prices. They can get three valuers and they can all be bloody different, can't they? So never
And
hang
none of
your
them
hat on
come with a deposit check, do they?
it. Eh?
None of those valuations come with a deposit check.
No, they don't. But I'm not boo-hooing them. They have a job to
No.
do. But
Yeah, yeah.
we can actually mitigate that when, depending if the market's going down or the market's going up, and when was the valuation done. If we're post the triple CFA, then all the valuers were high anyway. If it was
Yeah.
post-COVID for that 18 months, all the valuers were bloody low. I had three buyers trying to use three valuers, get three valuations, three properties, and wonder why I missed out on them all. Valuations are obviously historic. And so finding out where we are now, you would have gone through that with your vendor on the pre-auction and got them all set up for that. That's what I'm talking about, Aaron, setting them
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So you set the vendor up, you get the vendor into a situation, and you're sitting down talking to him. He would know that you've said. So you would challenge him in the auction room anyway. So I'm at 1 million before you do the reserve. And you say, oh, yeah, okay, so we've read the reports. We know that's highly optimistic looking at where we're coming. So you're stuck on that. I just need to know, right, okay, I'll shoot for your 1 million all day long, John. But what happens if we were to actually get, say, 980 in the room, 970, just a little bit below the feedback? Are we going to negotiate with these people? Or don't get rid of them? Okay, so you're starting to move them down, move them down. So reserve sets and thing is not about moving price, it's about moving headspaces.
Yes.
And so there was one that I did just recently. You can always get a person. So I believe in strong trust, and it works. And one day I'll take you through it all. But I believe it works. But you'll always get people who are outside the box. People that know more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And there was one that I was doing not so long ago, and you walk into the reserve set, for example, he's got his head He's got his arms folded. He's looking at me. He's all arrogant, and I'm sorry he was. And
Yeah.
we had 920 as the feedback. And I said to him, where would you like to set your reserve? He said, well, I'm not a cent under 100 and, 1,200,000. So if you're not at 1,200,000, I don't care what you say. It's fine. And you understand? I said, you have read the reports. He says, yes. I said, well, why don't you set your reserve at 2 million?
Oh.
He said, well, you're being bloody stupid. I said, you started it. So, and then you just, you have a little bit of a talk and you just smile a bit and then bring it back, say, come on, 1.2, you weren't listening to anything. Tell me about it, And he said to me, well, the reason why we need 1.2 million, I realise you're telling us where the market is, Wayne, but we found a house that we like over in Sydney. It's an apartment and you've got to be 1.2 to go. So it's obviously destination value. The problem with that, mate, is that all our buyers have done their due diligence on what the property's worth. So we've got 5 people coming to buy your house and they're looking at the wrong figures. We've actually stuffed this up. He says, how did you stuff it up? I says, well, we've been advertising for the buyers in the marketplace. What we should have done is said, you're moving to Australia, going into an apartment that's 1.2 million. And if you're not at 1.2 million, you shouldn't be, selling. He says to me, well, that's bloody stupid. He says, we wouldn't have got anyone through the room. I said, well, go figure.
And Wayne, I love that destination value. How many times do people, and they're all good people, but yeah, they destination value. It just sums it up. They want a value that pays for their destination on where they're going to, right? Versus actually market view.
Yeah, and if you get your price right, if you get your trust levels right, you can enter that danger fine. We had a lady just recently, in fact, on Thursday, I called the auction on Thursday. She'd on the market with the opposition at 1.2. She had bought a house in Whitianga and she had to sell it. Sell this, hurting with bridging.
Yeah.
And the other agent, another agency, had overpriced it. And in about 6 months, and about 4 months later, they gave us a ring, and it was bridging was starting to hurt. So she needed a result. And we straight away addressed the price and we took her through the process and then we addressed the price and say, hey, listen, I think there might be a fundamental reason why you aren't selling at 1.2. She says, I thought she did it too dear. Well, we sold it the other day and she kissed us at 950,000.
Yeah.
3 buyers on the floor, 2 conditional. So we're holding up all right.
Yeah.
And we had 930, 950 and 960. So, market value is not your fault. Just bring the people through, see where you go. With the buyers, you've got to actually give the buyers, reason to think that they're going to get surety of purchase. So don't forget, if it's 42 days or 50 days to buy, if it's in rural and Horowhenua, it's 180 days to buy. Okay, I'll tell you not, all right? And that's what I found in Gisborne, was the average time to sell was high. So I did a lot of auctions that didn't sell, but by God, did the average time to sell drop down on those properties. We sold them 2 weeks later, all right? Okay. And so, sorry, mate.
And no. I'm writing these out as you're talking, Wayne. There's some real gold in here. So what are the faults that you see? We separate the people, what's happening, right? So most people are good people, but what are the main errors that you see agents making with auction campaigns?
Well, they don't get enough
building no trust.
Yeah, that's right. Starters, a lot of them aren't getting enough marketing.
Okay.
I had a bloke the other day, a mate of mine actually, selling his beach property up in Waverley, and and he's having it. He says, "Listen, I'm not going to market. I know what you do. I know what you're going to say, Wayne. You can shut up. I'm not going to market. I'm not going to spend money on marketing because I know up in Waverley it's going to be the right time, right place, buyer. Timing is everything, and I'll just wait." And I said, "Well, that's good. What do you really want to sell?" He says, "Yeah." "Well, why are you selling?" He says, I want a property down closer to work. And I said, yeah, fine. And I agree with saying timing is right. And timing, 90% of real estate. He says, yeah. Would you like to know a way of shortening that timing tenfold and give you an opportunity to get more than you expected? An opportunity, I said. He said, what, you can adjust timing? I says, yeah. It's called marketing. And if you have a look at if you see me about the marketing, I'll show you a way which you can make timing in your control. He says, okay. Oh, yeah, all right. So we sat down. He says, and he's pretty good mate. But he was adamant when he said it. And I said, but the timing saw there's two sides to one is you're going to get more people coming through your property. You're going to get a hell of a lot more people making, even though it's up there at the beach, more people making inquiries. So your timing is going to be taken care of. The other thing is that increasing the customer reach enables your education, and it seems, and information is crucial when you're setting a price. And I said that, the carriers of that information predominantly have their buyer's hat on. So the more people we get through your property, it doesn't stand for reason. You're going to give yourself a better opportunity to get a better price. Instead of giving equity out to a database buyer, you'll have an opportunity here to get what you need and get it done quick. You talk about young people buggering things up, or not buggering things up, but not doing things as good. They get a bit shy.
Sometimes they can be old like us too, right? They can still bugger things up.
They don't understand
But I love I'll just let you take it. I love that giving equity to a database buyer, right? So what we're saying is limited competition. So you're giving up some equity to them because it's easier for the buyer to negotiate against limited competition.
A lot of people do, don't they? They
Yeah.
think, I've got a buyer that can go through it, got them on my database, I'll give you a call. You know, oh yeah, you'll get a sale, all right. Who you working for here?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I'm working for my buyer, not the seller.
you understand the benefits of what marketing is actually going to do and what it does. It's got a two-sided sword, and one obviously to get a premium, the other one's to get the information, because what you want to do is put people into that position of exactly what's in the marketplace. And what better than the current people that are coming through? They're the carriers of the information that we require. And current buyers, they seem to be in focus with what's happening economically with the country. So I always, when I'm a buyer, I want to get that buyer into a situation where they've got surety of purchase. Don't forget, you're going to change a 50-day market down to 27 days. What happens if they've seen it in the last 7 days? It's only 7 days before auction. What is going to make them drop everything? Do they finally fall in love with it? Because there's a freedom of choice out there at the moment that the buyers that for years. Do you know, in Wellington in the last 6 months, it's 20% of every listing in the town, in the city, sells on a monthly basis. That means 80% doesn't. 80% doesn't.
Well, I'll tell you, in Auckland at the moment, it's under 10 when you
Oh
take the
my
current
God.
stock on the market and what sold
So
last month.
So when you're going to give an option, right, that's going to belie that trend of in tune, people know that if they don't see the house tomorrow, who gives a shit? They'll see it tomorrow night. Oh, them in the next weekend, it'll still be up, and they
Yeah.
are week after week. You've got to change the mindset of the people coming through and saying, "Hey, I'm selling in 4 weeks." How do you do that? You got to get your text right for starters. I noticed that a lot of the paper, a lot of people's ads, they're too long. They're too long. I'm going to get a stamp made. TLDR. I said, can you check my ad? TL semicolon DR, which is too long, didn't read. Sorry. But
No, 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 no.
Churchill come up with a saying, didn't he?
Sorry?
And he was a great quoter, and he said to this young lieutenant, "Son, this report, by the very length of it, defends itself from ever being read." I think that way every time I see these long ads. So get your photography right. Is it going to get people off their bum to come to the auction?
I just wanted to thank you very much for those pearls of wisdom. I have taken a full A4 of notes around I shudder to think with their motivation. Motivation is higher than price, disclosure by market discovery, giving equity to a database of buyers. Wayne, it's gold. I thank you, and we'll see you out there on the auction floor.